All right, welcome to the last, hopefully, video on this Dr. Z Maz 18 with Reverb. Today's cab that you're going to be hearing it through is one I just got for another client. It's a Guitar Cabinets Direct.com deluxe reverb style cabinet with a WGS warehouse guitar speakers ET65. I did a review of this cab. The link will be in the description below. Nice little extension cab, sounds good. Good match with this Maz 18 with the 65 watt speaker. Before I get into how this thing really sounds, you're going to get a chance to, before I get into how this thing really sounds now, let me do that again. Before I get into how it sounds now that the final work was done, there was one last thing I needed to do inside the chassis and one thing to do inside the cabinet, and I'll show that now, and then you'll get a chance to hear this thing. This is hopefully the last video on this Dr. Z Maz 18 with Reverb. The final bit was to install the post-phase inverter master volume, as I mentioned, because the existing single gain master volume in the Mark I was both before the reverb, which made the reverb weak, and as you turned it down, the output of the amp would clean up. So you could try to get overdrive, but because it was before the mixer, the reverb mixer, and before the phase inverter, those two gain stages would stop being driven as hard, and so a lot of the natural gain of the amp was coming from those two stages. And so by going to the post-phase inverter master volume, like they did in the Mark IIs, I'm going to turn this off just so I don't zap myself. Pardon me. By going to the post-phase inverter, the reverb is always at its strongest level. It's being fed as strong a signal as the gain pot, the volume pot at the beginning sets, so that you're going to have a good ratio there. And you're always going to have the overdrive characteristics of the reverb mixer gain stage and the phase inverter, which is a mild gain stage, but it's a real gain stage. There's no negative feedback in these amps. So there's no downside to doing this. I don't know if they did it exactly the same way I did, but I know that this way works very well. It's reliable, it's safe. These resistors here are just in case there was ever a failure in the pot, so there will always be a bias reference from the grid, which is the center wiper connections on this pot, to ground. And in the process, I also separated this bus wire that was across all the pots. So you have all the output stuff in the cathode, and et cetera, the output, the phase inverter, grounded to the chassis here. Everything else is up here. It's better to go in here and set more stuff, but then you're relying on all, just individual pot connections to chassis, and because of the way they have such a thick panel and relatively short bushing pots, there's no way to get a really strong mechanical connection on each individual pot. This is not the way I would do it were I designing this, but I was not designing this, I am fixing this. So now it's got a very nice master volume that maintains the response to the amp at all but the very lowest levels. You'll hear that in the playing video I'm going to do with a real mic. The reverb is consistent, the reverb is much louder. See the previous videos for how we did that. The noise floor of the entire amp is tremendously lower, not just because the amp was trying to blow up when it first came in. See the first video for the real horror story, but because I made some changes above and beyond what was going on in the stock Mark I circuit. The next thing I'm going to do is put this chassis back into the cabinet and reattach the reverb tank and try to find a position for that tank with the lowest noise and hum, as I showed by moving the tank around near the transformers outside of the cabinet, outside of the reverb tank bag. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. I'm going to see if I can find a magic spot where I can secure it that'll give us lowest noise. Something I wanted to point out here for anyone who has a Mark I, who cannot bring this to a tech like me to have this kind of stuff done, doesn't want to send it back to Dr. Z, and does not have the skills to do this themselves, there is a simpler mod you can do. I cannot show it, but I can describe it, and it's very simple. Here is the wiper from the treble pot. In stock form, that wiper went to the input of the master volume pot, which was a single gain pot. It was this one right here. and then the wiper of that pot then went to this point right here. If you do what I did here and move this wire that was going from here to the wiper of the treble pot, then all of a sudden you fixed the majority of the issues. And then there's a resistor here to ground and a resistor here. If you remove those two resistors, you can just snip them. If you run a new wire from this point to the input of the old master volume pot, and from the wiper of that master volume pot to this point right here, then you will have a much better location for the master volume pot, even with the old single gain, because it will be after the reverb mixer. It will not affect your reverb level, and it'll just be right before the phase inverter, be a more transparent spot because the phase inverter input is very high input impedance. And you will still have more gain than stock because you will have the reverb mixer to drive as well. So that would be my budget fix for this, and it's very simple to do. It's a matter of moving, snipping, or if you want to, you can professionally desolder, but snipping two resistors, moving this wire to here, moving the input from this pot, which will be freed up from here, to this point, and a new wire from the wiper of the old pot to this point. And that is level 1 of how to fix this thing. So let me play around with fighting the reverb tank, and then I will do a real playing video in the other room with a microphone and a couple different guitars, and we'll see how this thing is sounding before it goes home. Okay, I'm trying to finish up this Dr. Z Maz 18 with reverb. And if you recall, the reverb tank was in the cabinet the wrong way for maximum hum. And it seemed to be factory, given that this reverb bag is not really a bag, it's just a big square of Tolex, and it was rubber cement or some other adhesive holding it together. And I had to pull that apart to get the tank out because there's no way to pull it at the end because the way they had it all adhesed up. So I'm going to see if just using my heat gun on this old stuff might reactivate it enough for it to rebond. Let's see. Okay, after the heat gun, this seems to have done the trick. It's not ideal, but I don't think it's going to come loose. I wish I had some Gorilla Tape. I'm out of my Gorilla Tape. I like that stuff. It looks like carbon fiber. But I used to be able to find a roll about that wide, and now everything's this wide. And I need to look on Amazon or something. I like the 1 1/4 much better than the 3-inch. That's what she said. Anyway, let me put this back in the cab and see how we're doing. So as you can hear, the massive, massive hum that it came in with is all gone. The inaudible reverb with massive, massive hum has been tamed. There is still residual hum in the amp because the star ground layout is not the best. And there's a little bit of hum in the reverb left because of where the tank physically is in relation to the transformers. If you must have a Dr. Z Maz 18 with reverb, get the combo. In the combo, the tank's on the bottom, and there's no issue at all with hum. In general, the non-reverb Mazes sound better. They're much quieter. I'm not a big fan of the reverb design. But now the reverb is louder. They're about 9:30 o'clock than it was full tilt when it came in. The hum is residual. It's way in the background. as you can hear, the Maz does not have a lot of headroom. You know, you can play soft, but as soon as you dig in a little bit. So if you really need it clean, back off a lot. But it's not a clean machine. Let me make it a little bit brighter. Trying to cut up a bit. They have it wired backwards from a Vox, so on the Maz, clockwise is brighter, which is more intuitive, but it does give a different taper to the pot. It does tend to darken a little bit as you roll the volume down on the guitar. That's the amp, not this guitar. But just a little bit. It's not objectionable. And then we have the master volume. So. So if you wanted to do high gain, bedroom level use, I think you're using your bedroom wrong, but the amp will work for you. Whereas in stock form on the Series 1, the Mark 1 rather, if you turn the master down that far, you'd have a very clean signal. As I covered in previous videos, the Mark 1 had the master volume before the reverb mixer and before the phase inverter. So as you turn it down, it cleaned everything up because you lost 2 gain stages. I installed the post-phase inverter master volume like on the Mark IIs that Dr. Z makes now, which moves it after the phase inverter. So you get those 2 gain stages at all master volume settings. There's always a trade-off based on how our ears hear non-linearly and how the speaker reacts. Even a very efficient speaker like this, it's, you know, at a certain point on the master volume threshold, and here it's below 9 o'clock still, it's just not moving enough air to really have harmonic content from the speaker itself or for us to really hear it properly. I'm not going to get into Fletcher Munson curves, but the low volume stuff, our ears hear the mid-range where the human speech is located, and we attenuate out the highs and lows. But above about 10 o'clock on the master volume, and remember that preamp is dimed, it's going to be effective. You could do a lot of small clubs like this. I apologize to my neighbors before I do this full preamp and full master. that's a light pine cab, and the whole thing was going, ooh, the whole thing was vibrating. A little bit more than most Fenders do. As you might hear, there is still buzz in this. Like I said, it's got a bad ground scheme. That's with the reverb off now. I could get rid of all that noise, but it's outside the client's budget from this amp. And that's just the way of the world sometimes. Anyway, I think this amp sounds a million times better than it did when it came in. It's healthy. It's not going to catch on fire. The remaining hum bugs the hell out of me, but I can't fix things just because I'd like to fix them all the time. This would need an entirely new ground scheme and a reverb, actually a cabinet about 4 inches higher for the reverb to be quiet. So it is what it is, but it's a lot better than it was.